The Rolex Submariner or the Cartier Santos, which should you get? Depending on your wrist, lifestyle, or sense of fashion, the choice might actually surprise you. If you're thinking of dropping some serious cash on a Rolex Submariner, just hold on for a second. Before you dive headfirst into that waitlist, you might want to take a look at another icon that's a little more under the radar. In this video, we're going to compare the crowd favorite Rolex Submariner with the underdog Cartier Santos de Cartier across a few different aspects. My final pick is likely one that most people might not agree with, but stick around to find out why. Let's first consider the branding and heritage of Rolex and Cartier. Everyone knows what a Rolex Submariner is, even if they've never set foot in a watch store. This is the classic dive watch that pretty much set the standard for everything that came after. It's ubiquitous, and depending on whether you like to stand out or blend in, that may be a good or bad thing. It's been around since 1953, and over the years, it's been strapped to the wrist of deep-sea explorers, Hollywood spies, and everyday guys trying to add a little bit of edge to their office look. It's that mix of utility and prestige that gives the sub this aura. Whether you are 300 meters underwater or just trying to open a beer at a barbecue, it feels like you're wearing a serious piece of equipment. When you rock a Submariner, it's like you're telling the world that you mean business. Conversely, the Santos is a totally different flavor. Most people don't know this, but Cartier actually popularized the idea of a wristwatch with the Santos. It's got a story that starts way back in 1904, when Louis Cartier designed it for his friend, a pilot named Alberto Santos Dumont. Wristwatches weren't yet a thing. People were checking time on a pocket watch, but fumbling through your pocket while you're up in the air trying to fly a plane probably isn't the best idea. So Louis Cartier made Alberto something wearable on the wrist, and that's how the modern wristwatch for men was born. These days, most people think of Cartier as a jewelry brand, but they've been around making watches for such a long time, and this heritage is definitely present. The Santos was actually launched half a century earlier than the Submariner. What's amazing is that the design of the Santos didn't change all that much in the 120 years since. That square case, Roman numerals, minute track, and beautiful cabochon are all proof that good design endures over time. On the surface, Cartier's reputation as a jewelry maison means that some people might think that the Santos is just a fashion watch, but for those who are in the know, they'll know that you know what you're really getting. If you're gravitating towards a Cartier timepiece, it means you value style just as much as substance. If I'm being completely objective here, and if we're just looking solely at brand equity with the context of sports watches, it's hard to deny Rolex's claim to fame. I mean, you just walk around town or in the airport, and you're guaranteed to see a number of Submariners all around the wrist. If you want to make a statement, the Rolex will definitely do it. But if you're a quiet luxury kind of person, the Cartier will slip under most people's radar. Now let's talk a little bit about design. Visually, the sub's a classic for a reason. 41mm case, black ceramic bezel, the bold lume. It's clean, confident, and unmistakably Rolex. It's a look that Rolex has refined over the years. No major changes, just small, subtle improvements to modernize the watch, from the 4 to 5 and now 6-digit references. And that consistency helps to make the Submariner look so ubiquitous. The Sub has been worn for any and every occasion and activity out there. It's the kind of watch that looks just at home on a wetsuit as it does under a cuffed shirt sleeve. Stylistically, the Sub leans sporty. No frills, just function-first design with a bit of polish. That glossy bezel gives it a nice visual pop and highly symmetrical if you're going with the no-date version. The latest generation of the Sub with the beefed up case and all that steel makes it feel and look indestructible. It's the kind of piece that looks sharp without trying too hard. Understated flex if there ever was one. Now moving on to the design of the Santos. It's got curves and edges in all the right places. I just personally really love the curved sapphire crystal on the dial. The square case with rounded corners is such a nice break from all the round watches out there, and those exposed screws give it a kind of refined industrial feel. The mix of brushed and polished surfaces give it a sporty elegance. There's also that distinctive crown with a blue cabochon. You wouldn't think to put a piece of stone on a watch as sporty as the Santos, but again, it speaks to the idea of sporty elegance. and it pairs perfectly with the blue steel hands. In terms of style, the Santos leans dressier, but with attitude. It feels a little Parisian, a little rebellious, and definitely fashion forward without being trendy. Compared to the Sub, which has just one look, the Santos also comes in a variety of sizes, dial colors, and even case material. Most people will probably still opt for this classic version with the white dial, but if you ever want an alternative, there's plenty of choices out there. And then you also got Quick Switch, which allows you to quickly swap out the bracelet for something that feels a little more you. Whether you prefer the look and feel of a metal bracelet, rubber strap, or leather strap, you can swap around in seconds. You can find a version that feels just right with no trouble whatsoever. Both the Sub and Santos are definitely icons in their own ways, but I'll say that the Santos has a slight edge, mainly due to its shape nature. Round watches are dime a dozen, and while many more square watches have entered the market since the Santos introduction, few can capture the imagination in the same way. Its soft lines, different surface finishing, subtle details like the cabochon, and even that hidden Cartier logo at 7 o'clock gives the watch an extremely charming personality. Now, moving on to the wrist, let's look at how both watches wear. There's a clear winner here in my opinion, and it may not be what you think. With the Sub, it definitely has presence, and I mean that literally. It's very well constructed and solid. It's not heavy, but you'll definitely feel it. For my 6.5-inch wrist, the 41mm case with 12.3mm thickness is right on the edge of wearability. The oyster bracelet on the Submariner is a big part of what makes this watch so iconic. In fact, I think that this bracelet might even be more recognizable than the Sub is. Rolex bracelets are really well made, and most people already know that. Good proportions and taper, links are rounded and smooth with good articulation, there's no skin pinching going on when you put on the watch, and there's a good ratio of bracelet to watch weight, which really helps with the wearing experience. It's just an all-round solid bracelet that has set the standard for sports watches out there. And the glide lock clasp is really useful. You can adjust up to 20mm without needing any tools, and that's something that you don't really realize you need until your wrist swells up halfway through the day. That being said, I do wish that the clasp was a little bit smaller. It's quite big as it is, and I would definitely prefer a smaller clasp with just 10mm of adjustability compared to the current glide lock clasp. If your wrist isn't wide enough, the bracelet and clasp won't sit well. If I had to sum up how I feel whenever I put on the Submariner, it's like I'm putting on a suit of armor. Maybe it's the heft of the watch, or maybe it's just the large brushed surfaces of the maxi case. Now, the Santos couldn't be more different. Both are sports watches with a metal bracelet, but that's where the similarities end when it comes to wearability. In my opinion, wearability is where the Santos really shines. It's slim, it's light, and it slips under a cuff without a fight. It's a 40mm case that's just 9.38mm thick, and the case design with the smooth underside means that it wears flat and very close to the wrist. Honestly, the watch disappears when you put it on. The bracelet also feels really comfortable. This horizontal single link, or what I like to call a ladder bracelet, flows right into the case, and the rivets continue the design of the case. The individual links of the Santos don't articulate as much as the Submariner, but in practical wear, that's not a problem. There's no gaps, no pinching, no sharp surfaces, just smooth, wrist-hugging goodness. Now, the biggest criticism I have would have to be the lack of micro adjustment on the clasp. In this day and age, when even the bracelets on micro brands that cost a fraction of the Santos have a version of on-the-fly adjustment, there's no excuses for the bigger brands to not have it. Now, that being said, the bracelet has this thing called Smart Link, which makes adding and removing bracelet links a fuss-free and tool-free experience. On the daily basis, this might be quite useless because after the bracelet has been sized, you wouldn't need to use it anymore. But if you're into sharing watches with your partner, this is really a huge plus. For me, when it comes to wearability, it really isn't a contest. The Santos is way more comfortable to wear. It hugs the wrist really well, whereas the Submariner with its protruding case back floats off my wrist. Now, of course, this may just be a function of my wrist size. If you have a larger wrist, perhaps the Submariner works better for you. That being said, I do wish the Santos came with micro adjustment feature. If they can have features like the Smart Link, Quick Switch, surely a micro adjustment isn't too difficult to produce. Now let's talk about real-world use cases and the versatility of both watches. These days, we are no longer constrained by traditional dress codes when it comes to watch pairings. but the Sub's prominent design can be a bit of a weakness. You can absolutely dress down a Sub for casual outings, but the reverse, if you want to dress it up, isn't quite so easy. With its obvious dive watch heritage, the Sub can look a little bit out of place when worn with a suit. This is especially true if your wrists are on the slimmer side. With the older 4 or 5 digit references, the Sub does actually look decent on the leather strap. But with the latest generation of the Maxi case, there's just too much metal and it looks off balance on the leather strap. I'm saying this as a strap guy. The Sub is at its core a serious tool watch, and it might be a little out of place in a dressier setting. But it's a totally different case with the Santos. If we're just considering this classic Santos on a metal bracelet, the slimness of the watch, along with some of its design elements, means that you could actually pull this off in a sporty and dressy setting. With the quick switch feature, you can very easily take off the bracelet and change it to a different strap. Day at the beach, the white sailcloth CTS is your go-to. Night at a fancy restaurant, then suit up with a navy Saffiano leather strap. And you can find all these straps and more on our website at deluxe.com. But the Santos isn't perfect though. It doesn't have a screw-down crown, and the water resistance is just up to 100 meters, and there's no lume at all. So this is really more of a modern iteration of a desk diver, and not the best watch to have if you're going to actually be diving or doing any intense water activities. To me, the Santos is the more versatile watch, mainly because of its ability to easily switch between the bracelet and different straps. It can be a true one watch collection that can accompany you on almost all of your daily activities. Now I'm going to briefly touch on the movement. Briefly because if you want extreme accuracy, you have a phone in your pocket for that. But I know some people still care about this. Inside this Sub, you've got either the 3230 or 3235 caliber, depending on whether you go with the date or no date version. It's got Rolex Chronology Escapement, which sounds fancy, but what you really need to know is that it's accurate, it's reliable, and it runs for 70 hours. The Santos runs on the in-house 1847MC movement with 42 hours of power reserve. It's not chronometer certified, but in real-world use it's solid. The official specs have it at +3 or -7 seconds per day, which is more than fine for most people using a mechanical watch. To me, the Sub has the slight edge when it comes to the movement, but really I don't think anyone is going to be too concerned about the movements coming out of Rolex or Cartier. They're reliable, they're proven, and they just work. There's no fancy decoration, there's no display case bags to see the beating heart of the movement, but that's probably not why you're buying a Rolex or Cartier anyway. Now I want to spend a bit of time talking about pricing and availability. The Sub goes for about $9,100 US, but usually you can't get one at retail even if you walk in the door with cash in hand. Most of the time you're either waiting months to get it from the Rolex boutique or probably paying a premium on the secondary market. But the resale value of the Submariner is strong, and I know how important of a factor this is for most people. Even if you bought the watch, but it isn't what you imagine it to be, you're not going to be losing much when you sell the watch. And the market is extremely liquid. Rolex practically sells themselves. Meanwhile, the Santos comes in at a retail price of $7,500 US, and here's the best part, you can actually buy it. No wait list, no build a relationship with your AD bullshit. Just walk in, try a few on, and walk out with the one that you like. And because there's less hype, prices on the pre-owned market are pretty friendly too. It's a much smoother purchasing experience from start to finish. Now, if we're just comparing the MSRP, the Santos represents very good value, and you can even use the price difference between the two to pick up a few straps for different options. If you want to just walk in the boutique and get the full experience of buying your first luxury watch, it's going to be much easier and less frustrating than the Rolex. But if you're thinking of value retention or the investability of a watch, I know we don't talk about that much, but it's practical, then you really can't beat the crown for what it is. So if you want dive watch credibility, bulletproof build quality, and a watch that pretty much everyone recognizes, you should get the Sub. It's not easy to get, but once it's yours, it's something you could hold on to for life. There's definitely a strong appeal with the Submariner. It's reliable, it holds its value, it's built and wears like a tank. But it's not for everyone, especially if you prefer a watch that hugs the wrist well, or if you want something that's more low-key or dressy. The Santos almost feels like the anti-Submariner, in a good way. It's elegant, it's wearable, it's extremely versatile, and it has way more heritage and personality than people give it credit for. Plus, it doesn't feel like you're wearing the same watch as half the airport lounge. Now, one big criticism about the Santos is that polished bezel. It picks up marks and scratches very easily. That's definitely true, but in some ways it's also part of the charm of this watch. Now, these watches are bought to be worn, not sitting in a safe looking pristine. And honestly, if it really bothers you, you could always do what I did, just get the bezel brushed. I know many people are going to go crazy in the comments when I say this, but I think that the Santos is a watch that you should seriously consider if you're thinking about the Rolex Submariner. The Santos is my personal pick and the watch that I actually wear more often. This is a video that I've always wanted to make because I see so many people just default to wanting to get a Rolex Submariner as the luxury watch to get, just because it's a Rolex. And then they go on to complain about how difficult it is to purchase or how it's too large for their wrist. It doesn't have to be this way. There are many alternatives out there, and the Cartier Santos is one that I feel gives the Rolex a run for its money. So if you're seriously considering your next purchase, and if you have the opportunity to actually try on both watches in person, stop this video right now and just run to your AD and try it on. I would always encourage that because no amount of YouTube videos or forum discussions is gonna beat that in-person experience of wearing a watch and trying it on your wrist and seeing what you feel about it. Now, let me know in the comments if you agree with my recommendation here, and if you enjoyed this face-off or if you want to see more content like this, let us know.